When my brother laughed at my dream of becoming a filmmaker, I never imagined I'd one day make him eat his words in the most satisfying way possible. Stick around to see how I turned his mockery into my greatest motivation. And don't forget to like and subscribe to catch more stories of sweet, well-deserved vindication. Growing up in suburban Boston, I always knew I wanted to make films. Not just any films, stories that mattered, that made people feel something. I'm Evelyn, and this is the story of how my brother's mockery became the fuel for my greatest achievement. When I was 12, I got my first camcorder for Christmas. A bulky thing with terrible resolution, but to me, it was Hollywood in my hands. I'd follow my family around, directing mini documentaries about our mundane life, interviewing our golden retriever about his thoughts on squirrels, and recreating scenes from my favorite movies with my reluctant cousins as actors. My parents humored me. They'd sit through my amateur screenings in our living room, offering polite applause and constructive feedback. But my older brother Marcus? He saw my passion as the perfect target for his teenage sarcasm. "Here comes Spielberg Jr.," he'd announce whenever I entered a room with my camera. "Ready to bore us with another masterpiece?" I tried not to let it bother me, but when you're young, a sibling's opinion can cut deeper than anyone else's. Marcus was 3 years older, athletic, popular, everything I wasn't. While he collected trophies for track and field, I collected rejection letters from student film festivals. One summer evening when I was 16, I cornered my family for the premiere of my latest short film, a coming-of-age story I'd spent months perfecting. I dimmed the lights, pressed play, and held my breath. 20 minutes later, my mom wiped away a tear. My dad nodded approvingly, and Marcus let out an exaggerated yawn. "If you're waiting for Hollywood to call, don't hold your breath," he said, scrolling through his phone. "Maybe try something more realistic? Like, I don't know, accounting?" My face burned with humiliation. "You don't get it," I mumbled. "No, Evie, you don't get it," he shot back. "For every successful director, there are thousands of wannabes working at coffee shops. But hey, I'll save you a seat at my corporate box when I'm a big-shot executive, and you can film the game from there." That night, I cried into my pillow, not because I believed he was right, but because a part of me feared he might be. The odds were stacked against me. I knew that. But something in me refused to give up. I remember waking up the next morning with puffy eyes and a renewed determination. I grabbed my camcorder and headed to the local park, where I spent hours filming people: joggers, children playing, elderly couples feeding birds. I was searching for stories in the everyday, convincing myself that Marcus was wrong. The summer before senior year, I took a filmmaking workshop at the community college. The instructor, Ms. Reeves, was a documentary filmmaker who'd had moderate success with an environmental piece that screened at a few regional festivals. She was the first real filmmaker I'd ever met, and I hung on her every word. "Film is about truth," she told us. "Even fiction films, the good ones, contain emotional truth. That's what connects with people." After class one day, I showed her some of my work. She watched silently, her expression neutral. When the clips ended, she looked at me for a long moment. "You have a good eye, Evelyn," she finally said. "But more importantly, you have something to say. Don't lose that." I clutched those words close during my senior year, especially when Marcus would make comments about my little movies during his visits home from college. I applied to film schools, some prestigious, some not, and covered my bedroom walls with posters of my favorite directors. After high school, while Marcus went to an Ivy League business school, I attended a state college with a decent film program. He'd text me occasionally, "Found your Oscar acceptance speech yet?" Or, "Seen any good indie films about giving up?" I'd respond with thumbs-up emojis, masking my hurt with digital indifference. College was hard. I worked 2 jobs to afford equipment while maintaining my grades. My roommates got used to the apartment being transformed into makeshift sets on weekends. I survived on ramen and determination, telling myself that one day it would all be worth it. My sophomore year, I dated a guy named Derek, a fellow film student with a penchant for avant-garde cinema and black turtlenecks. He critiqued my work relentlessly, calling it too accessible and mainstream. We broke up when I found him in the editing bay with another girl, both literally and figuratively. The experience made its way into one of my student films, a dark comedy about artistic pretension that won the department's year-end showcase. That small victory gave me hope. My professors started taking notice, one even recommending me for a summer internship at a production company in New York. I spent those 3 months fetching coffee, making copies, and absorbing everything I could about the industry. The hours were brutal, the pay was non-existent, but I got to be on actual sets, watching professionals work. When I returned for junior year, I threw myself into my projects with renewed vigor. I called in every favor, borrowed equipment, and convinced friends to work for free, all to create a short film for my thesis. The result was rough around the edges but showed promise, enough that my advisor suggested I submit it to a few smaller festivals. To my shock, it got accepted to 2 of them. Nothing prestigious, but seeing my name in an official program sent a thrill through me that I'll never forget. I called my parents immediately, and they were genuinely excited. My dad even framed the acceptance letter and hung it in his study. I didn't tell Marcus. By then, he was in his final year at business school, landing interviews at top firms and talking about signing bonuses that made my student loan debt seem even more crushing. Graduation came, and while Marcus landed a cushy job at a finance firm in New York, I moved to Los Angeles with $2,000 in savings and a car full of dreams. My parents tried to hide their concern, but I heard them whispering when they thought I wasn't listening. Maybe Marcus is right. This film thing is such a long shot. The drive across the country was both terrifying and exhilarating. I'd never lived more than a few hours from home, and now I was heading to a city where I knew exactly 2 people, a former classmate and a cousin of my mother's who'd promised to get coffee sometime. I played film soundtracks the entire way, imagining my name in opening credits. The first 3 years in LA were brutal. I worked as a production assistant, carrying coffee and enduring verbal abuse from directors who'd forgotten what it was like to be at the bottom. I shared a cramped apartment with 3 other aspiring filmmakers, all of us chasing the same elusive break. My roommate Zoe landed a role on a network TV show in our second year, moving out and into a sleek downtown loft. Tasha got hired as a staff writer for a cable drama. Alex went back to Idaho to work in his father's insurance office. And I kept grinding, moving from one PA job to another, occasionally picking up gig work filming weddings or corporate events to make rent. On particularly bad days, I'd sit in my car during lunch breaks and watch my old student films on my phone, reminding myself why I was putting myself through this. Some nights I'd draft resignation emails to my current production, looking up flights back to Boston, my finger hovering over the book button, but I never clicked it. Instead, I joined a collective of female filmmakers who met monthly to review each other's work and share resources. Through them, I got better PA positions, then eventually an assistant editor role on a documentary about climate activists. The pay was still terrible, but it was a step up. More importantly, I was learning the craft from the inside. During a particularly rough patch, when I was considering moving back east and admitting defeat, I got a call from my mom. "Marcus got promoted," she announced, her voice brimming with pride. "He's buying a condo in Manhattan. Isn't that wonderful?" "That's great," I replied, glancing around my apartment with its secondhand furniture and water-stained ceiling. "Tell him congratulations from me." Later that week, Marcus called, something he rarely did. "Heard you're still in LA," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Still making movies nobody watches?" I gripped my phone tighter. "I'm working on something new." "Look, Evie." His voice softened with what I recognized as pity. "There's no shame in changing course. I've got connections at some good firms. Entry-level stuff, but it's stable. Benefits. I'm not giving up," I said firmly. He sighed. "It's not giving up. It's growing up. There's a difference." After that call, I channeled my frustration into a screenplay, a story about siblings and the different ways they measure success. I wrote every night after work, fueled by a mixture of spite and passion. When I finished, I knew it was the best thing I'd ever created. The screenplay took 4 months to complete. I'd wake up at 5 each morning to write before work, then continue late into the night. My social life became non-existent. My refrigerator contained nothing but coffee creamer and takeout leftovers. But the pages accumulated, and with them, a story I truly believed in. I shared early drafts with my filmmaker collective, incorporating their feedback, refining dialogue, tightening scenes. One of them, Layla, worked as an assistant to a literary agent and offered to pass it along. "No promises," she warned, "but it's good enough that someone should read it." 2 weeks later, the agent called. She didn't want to represent me, not yet, but she had notes, specific and thoughtful ones that showed she'd actually read the script. "Revise this," she said, "and I'll look at it again. You've got something here." I spent another month on revisions, cutting 20 pages and rewriting the third act entirely. When I finally resubmitted it, I tried to manage my expectations. The film industry runs on rejection. I'd learned that lesson repeatedly. I submitted it to every competition I could afford, then waited, trying not to check my email every 5 minutes. Weeks passed, rejection letters accumulated. But then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, I got the email. My screenplay had been selected as a finalist for the Emerging Voices Film Grant, a prestigious award that included funding to produce the winning script. With shaking hands, I called my parents. They were cautiously excited, tempering their enthusiasm with warnings not to get my hopes up. I didn't call Marcus. There was no point in sharing a maybe with someone who'd only see it as another dead end. In the weeks leading up to the announcement, I could barely focus on anything else. I imagined both outcomes obsessively, winning and finally getting to make my film, or losing and having to decide whether to continue this uphill battle. I practiced my gracious loser face in the mirror, just in case. The day of the announcement arrived. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the coffee shop where I worked part-time, refreshing the competition website on my phone. Then I saw it. My name, my script title, the word winner in bold letters. I screamed so loud that a concerned customer tapped on my window to check if I was okay. I was more than okay. I was vindicated. The prize included $50,000 to produce my film and mentorship from an established director. It wasn't Hollywood, but it was a legitimate foot in the door. That night, I called my parents, who screamed almost as loudly as I had. Then, with a surge of something between confidence and pettiness, I called Marcus. "Guess who just won the Emerging Voices Film Grant?" I said when he answered. A pause. What is that exactly?" I explained the significance of the award, trying to keep the smugness from my voice and failing miserably. "Well, congrats," he said, his tone hard to read. "So you get to make a movie that might actually be seen by people now?" "That's the idea," I replied. "Good for you," he said, then cleared his throat. "Look, I've got a meeting in 5. We'll catch up later, okay?" He hung up before I could respond. His lukewarm reaction stung, but I refused to let it dim my excitement. This was my moment, with or without his approval. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of pre-production. I assembled a small but talented crew, auditioned actors, scouted locations, and refined my script with my mentor's guidance. Every decision, from casting to camera angles, bore the weight of responsibility. This wasn't just my shot, it was my statement. My film, Parallel Lines, told the story of 2 sisters whose lives take dramatically different paths after high school. It wasn't exactly autobiographical, but the emotional core, the tension between different definitions of success, came straight from my relationship with Marcus. I cast Reena Patel as the ambitious corporate sister and Taylor Winters as the artistic free spirit. Both were struggling actors I'd met through the LA circuit, talented but overlooked. They brought dimensions to the characters I hadn't even realized were in my writing. My mentor, Diane Fletcher, had directed 3 independent features, one of which had been a Sundance darling a decade earlier. She was brutally honest but supportive, pushing me to think beyond safe choices. "If you're not terrified at least once a day," she told me, "you're not pushing hard enough." We secured locations through friends, favors, and sometimes sheer persistence. My apartment became production headquarters, with storyboards taped to every wall and schedules covering the refrigerator. I cashed in every favor I was owed and promised dozens more. Filming was both exhilarating and terrifying. 18-hour days, last-minute location changes, actors getting sick, equipment malfunctions, every independent filmmaker's nightmare checklist. But each evening, reviewing the day's footage in my tiny apartment, I knew we were creating something special. On the third day of shooting, our sound equipment failed completely. We had a crucial dialogue scene scheduled and no budget for immediate replacements. I called every contact in my phone, growing increasingly desperate, until finally one of my old film collective friends came through with borrowed gear. We started filming 6 hours late, finished at 3 a.m., and were back on set by 8 the next morning. A week later, we lost a location when the restaurant owner who'd agreed to let us film decided he wanted $500 instead of the free publicity we'd negotiated. I found myself in a parking lot, hyperventilating, while my assistant director made frantic calls to find an alternative. We ended up rewriting the scene to take place in a public park, which actually worked better for the story. When we wrapped, I spent weeks in a dark editing room, piecing together my vision. My mentor provided invaluable feedback, pushing me to make difficult cuts and strengthen the narrative. Finally, after countless revisions, Parallel Lines was complete, a 30-minute film that said everything I'd wanted to say for years. The first time I watched it from beginning to end, I cried. Not because it was perfect. I could see every flaw, every compromise, every moment where budget constraints had forced creative decisions. I cried because despite all that, it worked. It felt honest in a way I hadn't dared hope for. We submitted it to festivals, and to my amazement, it started getting accepted. First a small local showcase, then a respected regional festival, and finally, the email I read 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating, an invitation to screen at one of the top independent film festivals in the country. My parents immediately made plans to attend. "We wouldn't miss it for the world," my mom said, her voice cracking with emotion. "We're so proud of you, Evelyn." I hesitated before asking, "Do you think Marcus would come?" My mom's pause told me everything. "He's very busy with work, honey, but I'll mention it to him." The festival was being held in Austin, Texas, in 2 weeks. On impulse, I texted Marcus directly. "My film is screening at the Austin Independent Film Festival on the 17th. Would mean a lot if you could make it." 3 days passed before he responded. "Can't get away from work that weekend." "Rain check?" I stared at my phone, disappointment curdling into anger. Rain check? As if my first major film screening was a casual coffee date that could be rescheduled. After everything, after all the years of his dismissive comments and condescending advice, he couldn't take 1 day off to support me? That's when I had an idea. A petty, possibly immature, definitely satisfying idea. I called Marcus back. "Hey, I understand you can't make the festival, but I'm actually coming to New York the following weekend for some meetings. Maybe we could get together then? I'd love to show you the film." "Yeah, sure," he said, sounding surprised but pleased. "My place? I can invite some friends. People with industry connections might be good for you to meet." "Actually," I said, choosing my words carefully, "I was thinking more of a private screening. Just you and me, for old time's sake." He agreed, and we set a date. What I didn't tell him was that there were no meetings in New York. I was flying there for the sole purpose of making my brother eat his words. The festival in Austin exceeded all my expectations. Parallel Lines received a standing ovation, and afterward strangers approached me with tears in their eyes, sharing stories of their own family dynamics. A reporter from an independent film blog interviewed me, and a producer asked for my contact information. My parents beamed with pride throughout the entire weekend. "We always believed in you," my dad said during dinner after the screening. It wasn't entirely true. I remembered their worried glances and cautious suggestions about backup plans. But I appreciated the sentiment. They were here now, celebrating with me, And that's what mattered. The following Friday, I flew to New York with my laptop, a portable projector I'd borrowed from a friend, and a carefully planned speech. Marcus had texted earlier that day. "Looking forward to seeing you. My place at 7?" I replied, "Change of plans. Meet me at the parking lot behind your office building at 6:30. Bring a jacket." "What? Why?" He texted back immediately. "You'll see." At 6:25, I pulled into the parking lot. It was nearly empty at that hour, just a few cars remaining. I set up my projector against the blank wall of the adjacent building, positioned my laptop, and laid out 2 folding chairs I'd purchased that morning. The October air had a bite to it, and as I waited, I wondered if this whole idea was ridiculous. Maybe I should have just let it go, accepted his half-hearted congratulations, moved on with my career. But then I remembered all those years of dismissal, of being treated like my passion was a cute hobby that I'd eventually outgrow. No, he needed to see this, on my terms, not his. Marcus arrived at 6:40, looking confused and slightly annoyed as he approached in his expensive suit. "What are we doing out here? It's getting cold." "We're having a screening," I said calmly, gesturing to the chairs. "Your very own private showing of Parallel Lines, directed by your little sister who would never make it in film." His face flushed. "Evelyn, this is ridiculous. We can watch this in my apartment. I've got a 65-inch TV, for God's sake." "No," I said firmly. "We're watching it here, in this parking lot, because this is where dreams apparently go to die, according to you. Remember when you said I'd be lucky to film your corporate games from the box seats? Well, this is me, filming from the parking lot." He looked at me for a long moment, then shook his head and sat down. "Fine. Let's see this masterpiece of yours." I pressed play, and my film projected onto the wall. We sat in silence as the story unfolded. The story of 2 sisters, their diverging paths, their misunderstandings and grudging respect. The light from the projector illuminated Marcus's face as he watched, his expression unreadable. About halfway through, a security guard approached, asking what we were doing. Marcus flashed his employee badge and assured him it was fine. I caught a glimpse of respect in the guard's eyes when Marcus introduced me as my sister, the filmmaker. It was the first time I'd heard pride in his voice when describing what I did. When the credits rolled, I turned to him, ready for dismissal, ready for another condescending comment about my hobby. Instead, I saw something I hadn't seen on my brother's face in years. Respect. "That was," he started, then cleared his throat. "That was really good, Evie. Like, legitimately good." I waited for the but, the qualification that would minimize my achievement. It didn't come. "The scene where the sisters finally talk at the wedding," he continued, "when the successful one admits she's jealous of the other's freedom? That hit hard." I nodded, my prepared speech suddenly unnecessary. "That was the last scene we shot. The actresses nailed it in one take." Marcus stood up, running a hand through his hair. "I've been an ass, haven't I?" "Pretty much," I agreed. "It's just—" He hesitated. Success looked so specific to me. Corporate ladder, corner office, summer home. I couldn't see how your path could lead anywhere but disappointment. "And now?" He gestured to the makeshift screen. "Now I'm sitting in a parking lot watching my sister's award-winning film, feeling like the idiot who bet against Apple in the 90s. I laughed, and after a moment, so did he. "I'm sorry," he said, the words clearly unfamiliar in his mouth, "for all the times I made you feel like your dreams weren't worth chasing." "Apology accepted," I said, meaning it. "And thanks for coming to my parking lot premiere." We packed up the projector in companionable silence, then Marcus suggested dinner. Over pasta and wine, he asked real questions about my film, my future projects, the festival circuit. For the first time in our adult lives, we talked as equals, neither of us trying to prove something to the other. "So what happens next?" he asked, as we shared tiramisu. "After the festivals, I mean." "I'm working on a feature screenplay," I said. "It's early stages, but I'm hoping the attention from Parallel Lines might help me find funding." "What's it about?" I hesitated, then decided to be honest. "It's about 2 brothers. One who follows the expected path, one who doesn't. How they both end up questioning their choices. He smiled ruefully. Sounds familiar. Art imitates life, I shrugged. Listen, he said, leaning forward. I know I've been the last person to support your career, but I'd like to change that. I have some friends who invest in independent films. It's not my money to offer, but I could introduce you. I felt my defenses rise. I don't need charity, Marcus. It's not charity, he insisted. It's business. These people are always looking for promising projects to back. Your film is good, genuinely good. Let me at least make the introduction. As we parted that night, Marcus hugged me. A real hug, not the obligatory holiday embrace we usually exchanged. I'm proud of you, Evie, he said quietly. Really proud. Thanks, I whispered back, surprised by the tears pricking my eyes. That means a lot. On the flight back to Los Angeles, I reflected on my journey. The path hadn't been straight or easy. There were still no guarantees in my future. Independent filmmaking remained as precarious as ever. But I'd made something real, something that moved people. And somehow, along the way, I'd repaired a relationship I thought was permanently damaged. 2 weeks later, a package arrived at my apartment. Inside was a framed poster of Parallel Lines, professionally designed, with my name prominently displayed as director. The note read, "For your first of many. Frame the reviews too. They're going to be great. Marcus." I hung it above my desk, where I could see it while working on my next screenplay. Every time self-doubt creeps in, and it still does regularly, I look at that poster and remember the night in the parking lot when I reclaimed my narrative, both on screen and in life. 3 months after the Austin Festival, I received an email from a mid-sized production company. They'd seen Parallel Lines and wanted to meet about my feature screenplay. The meeting led to a development deal, modest by Hollywood standards, but enough to quit my day job and focus on writing full-time. Last Christmas, at our parents' house, Marcus and I stayed up late talking after everyone else had gone to bed. He'd just been through a difficult breakup and was questioning his career choices. Sometimes I wonder if I picked the wrong path, he admitted. If I went after what was expected instead of what I wanted. It's never too late to change direction, I told him. Trust me on that. He smiled. Maybe my next career will be as a film producer. Marcus Collins presents an Evelyn Collins film. Has a nice ring to it, I laughed. My brother mocked my dreams, so I invited him to my awards ceremony in a parking lot. But the real victory wasn't making him eat his words. It was finding the courage to keep creating despite the doubts, both his and my own. That's the thing about dreams. They don't require everyone's belief to come true. Sometimes your own stubborn faith is enough. And if you're wondering whether it's worth it, the years of struggle, the ramen dinners, the rejection letters, the skeptical family members, all I can say is this. The moment when your vision connects with another human being, when your story makes someone feel seen or understood, there's no corner office in the world that can compare.